I think it goes without saying that MMOs have changed a lot as a genre, probably more than any other game genre in history. And it feels like nowadays, basically every modern MMO has some sort of classic or old school version of it. But is it nostalgia that drives these old versions to exist? Is nostalgia the reason why people crave these old experiences? I don't think it is, and today we're going to talk about why. Back in the mid-2000s, MMOs were pretty much considered the pinnacle of what online gaming could be. You had web browser-based virtual worlds like Webkins and Club Penguin that were absolutely massive, and then you had full-scale MMOs like World of Warcraft, Runescape that absolutely dominated the space. And these games became really popular for good reason, because they were living, breathing worlds where you could do or be anything you wanted and socialize with other people. But biggest of all, they were simple. You had a massive world to explore, yet it was still fairly easy to figure out how to navigate. You had various skills, classes, professions, and slowly you figured out what the purpose of each of them was and what utility each of them provided. And in that, you would learn your own purpose in the world. Maybe you were a miner and you learned that you provided ore to blacksmiths, or maybe you were a warrior and you took more on the role of tanking in dungeons. And that example might seem a bit specific to World of Warcraft, but even if you look at games like Star Wars Galaxies, where you literally had a unique skill called Dancer, where you just provided buffs to other players. It was these roles and skills that helped make the world feel alive, and they were generally easy and simple to understand. And I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Oh, he's just got rose-tinted glasses. He can't let go of the way things used to be because he's just so blinded by nostalgia. And you know what? I can't have any nostalgia for those games because I don't have any nostalgia. I was 5 years old. I did not play MMOs back then. Everything that I've talked about so far has been my experience playing classic versions of MMOs. Old school RuneScape, classic World of Warcraft, Star Wars Galaxies Legends, all of these are games that I've played in the last 5 years. And you know what? I think they are superior to any modern MMO because of the one thing that I mentioned earlier, and that is simplicity. I think a massive problem that plagues modern MMOs is they are just so over-bloated with content. Look at any other live service type game like League of Legends, Fortnite, Path of Exile. Sure, they'll have new seasons come out with maybe new maps, new cosmetics, maybe a few new systems, but generally speaking, it's still the core game at its best. You don't see players asking for classic versions of their game because they're primarily content with the current version of their game. Sure, maybe they get nostalgic about early versions of the game, but it's not enough in the same way that it drives a classic version to actually exist, like with MMOs. But MMOs are a bit more unique in the sense where every year they have to be adding new zones, quests, raids, dungeons, you name it. And over time, it starts to add up a lot. Not only in the sheer amount of content, but also just the way the game fundamentally plays. As they add new systems, change the way classes work, traveling works, it starts to deviate from the original vision of the game. And this is where we've also seen a lot of classes and roles become over-homogenized, and a lot of that uniqueness in your purpose has been lost. And it makes modern MMOs honestly kind of a nightmare for new players to get into because there is just so much they have to learn. It's absolutely ridiculous and just completely overwhelms them, which I don't blame them one bit. If I was trying to get into WoW retail in 2024, I would probably drop it after a few hours because I would just be so overwhelmed by everything there is to do. And especially if you're like me and you're the kind of person who likes to catch up on all the story content a game has to offer, better set aside the next couple hundred hours to do that with WoW. When you compare games like RuneScape 3 or World of Warcraft Retail to their classic or old school counterparts, they're almost unrecognizable to each other. And for new players getting into these kinds of games, I can completely understand why classic versions are a lot less overwhelming for them to jump into. And I know this because this was the exact situation with my friends last year when I got them into WoW. The only version of the game they had any interest in trying was Classic. And Classic Hardcore at that, which, not to brag or anything, but all three of us got to level 60. Which is pretty crazy considering they were brand new to the game. But when I asked them about retail WoW, they had no interest in trying it because it was just too much, too big, and you know what? I don't blame them one bit. And now they've been doing the same with me, and they got me into old school Runescape, a game that they've been playing for a long time, and once again, that's the only version of Runescape I have any interest in trying. Which I have been doing a little video series on my journey through OSRS with my friends, so definitely check out my channel after this video. But the problem that plagues modern MMOs is something that I don't really think has an obvious solution. There's the approach that Destiny 2 took, where they just straight up vault or remove old content from the game, but that kind of creates the problem of now I don't want to play Destiny 2 because I can't do any of the old content, so I'm not so sure that's the right solution. But then there's the problem of when you keep all that content in the game, now there's too much and your players are overwhelmed, so it's kind of a double-edged sword, really. I mean, hell, maybe the solution is just make less content for MMOs, but I don't think that's going to make current players very happy. So it really is the question of, do you cater to your current player base, or do you make the game more accessible for new players? And that's again where I think classic MMOs come in, because they strike a perfect balance between having content that current players still enjoy doing to this day, and also being accessible and easy to get into for newer players. And I think modern MMOs are so much more than that now. It's beyond being just an RPG anymore. It's now a live service game and has to constantly give you reason to justify your subscription rather than just being a good game. They feed heavily into FOMO, or fear of missing out if you're not familiar with that term, and they're constantly giving you reasons to not want to miss things, whether it be a new armor set or a new mount in the trading post, or even just missing your weekly Tuesday vault. Again, I'm talking a little more specifically about WoW here, but you get my point. It's a problem that classic MMOs don't really suffer from nearly as much, other than feeling behind other players who maybe have more time to play. Now, that's not to say modern MMOs are bad. Well, if you asked my friends if RS3 was any good, they would tell you no, but I personally love retail WoW, and I play it just as much as I play Classic. I think the gameplay loop is super fun, but that still doesn't blind me from the problems that plague it. Now, I'm also not going to sit here and pretend Classic MMOs are perfect by any means, because they suffer from the problem of the modern MMO gamer becoming the new classic MMO player. And those are players who will only ever play in the most efficient way possible, they will only ever play things on meta, and they will only ever do meta strats. And if you do anything but those things, you will be excluded. And for the more casual MMO gamer, it can be kind of a sad reality, so definitely find yourself a group of people or a guild that plays kind of the way that you play. But at the end of the day, at least in the example of WoW, I think there's a very obvious reason why so many people want a complete reset on the game. Why people are asking about a WoW 2 or a just complete revamp of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, where those become the new baseline zones. It's because people want the return to form of simplicity. We just want the world to be a little bit smaller again, where everyone can be in the same continent and not so spread out all across the world with this massive abundance of content everywhere. But like I said, I don't think there's really an easy solution to this problem, because you can't really just remove content, but the game is always growing and getting bigger, so you gotta ask, at what point do you stop? And what about classic MMOs? We're seeing games like old school RuneScape constantly having new content being added, and if Classic Plus ends up happening, we're also going to see new content there. So what are those games going to look like a decade from now? Are they going to be overbloated with content and start suffering from the same problem all over again? At what point is it too much? And what is the solution? Maybe the honest solution is just MMOs becoming more seasonal like other online service games, and we just have more complete resets back to the basics happen more often. I mean, just look at how often people push for fresh classic servers to exist. Well, why don't we do the same with modern MMOs? Where each new reset we get bits and pieces of new content as well as returning old content that people enjoyed. But at the end of the day, like I said, it really is hard to come up with a solution to this problem because these are ever-growing games. They only ever get bigger and never get smaller. But at least for now, it seems the primary solution is just the existence of classic versions, at least until they start getting too big as well. Which I feel like we're already starting to see with the abundance of different versions that even classic WoW seems to have nowadays. So let me know in the comments below what you think the solution to this problem might be, because it's certainly not an obvious one. When you are trying to make a game simple and easy to get into for new players, it's kind of hard when you're always growing and getting bigger. If you did enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe. I appreciate all the support that I can get, and see you guys in the next video.